Good evening, everybody. Sarah Batchelor here. I'm a teacher in the province of Alberta, and tonight I thought I would come on and talk to you guys a little bit about, what's been going on with, the world of education, as I tend to do, and those sorts of things. And tonight I'm just kind of chatting for a couple seconds because I'm actually starting the stream 2 whole minutes early, and I'm kind of hoping it's all working. And so, those of you who know me know I'm fairly new to this world. All like 430 subscribers, which is hilarious. And when I first started, I honestly thought most of them were my students, but now I think I actually have adults watching me, which is even better. Because some of the stuff I talk about really isn't meant to be talked about with my students, or if it was, I probably would phrase it a little bit differently. And clearly, I'm here to talk about the world of education and what's going on there, and I'm talking to adults. So for those of you just joining us, I'm Sarah Batchelor, and I'm a music and special education teacher, among other things, here in Airdrie, Alberta. And this morning when I woke up, I had a message that said that the Alberta Commission of Learning document had disappeared off of the Alberta government's website, which was concerning because last week we noticed that the links for the recall petition applications had been disabled, or there was a technical glitch. And just when you watch around the world, you see that sometimes governments tend to start to make things disappear online. And we can think of our neighbor to the south, like a lot of stuff that's disappeared that used to be public access. And, freedom of speech and freedom of information and being able to make up your own mind by researching and learning about different information, that's really important. So when information starts being removed, which isn't what I'm saying happened here, but there's always the concern because it's happened in other places. That hits me because I'm like, that's kind of like censorship, and we certainly don't approve of that. I hope in a democratic country, province. Hopefully we're still a democratic province. And so when I checked back about 20 minutes ago, the document is now available again. But until about 1 o'clock today, I wasn't able to find it or access it. So when we get to my final slide in this whole thing where it says as of 9 a.m. this morning, it wasn't there. It wasn't. But as of exactly 5 p.m. today, I did check. It is. You can go and read the document for yourself. It's quite a long document, and it's well worth the read. So I thought today, maybe I would go through this document with you briefly and talk a little bit about some of the concerns that we have, because we don't need fresh committees, we don't need a task force, we don't need anything to study it. The UCP has said, oh good, we're going to engage with teachers by providing more information about this. Well, back in 2003, which is the year after the strike of 2002, we already did this, right? They studied it 22 years ago. They gathered the data. They listened to parents. They listened to teachers. They listened to students. And they wrote down all the answers. And what they came up with was called the Alberta Commission on Learning, or ACOL, as I'm going to call it from now on. And it was done in 2003. The report is titled, as you can see here in the yellow, Every Child Learns, Every Child Succeeds, which is exactly what we want education to look like. And so this comprehensive study was done to try and figure out how to make that happen. And I really want to point out right from the beginning, this isn't about one political party or another. Because right now, yes, we're very focused on the UCP and all of this sort of thing. They're not the only government that's dropped the ball when it comes to education. This is about a bigger philosophical switch that we have to flip, because it doesn't matter who's in power, education needs to work. It isn't acceptable to me as an educator, as a parent, as a member of a democratic society, that my children don't have access, that my students don't have access to the supports that they need, right? We want to grow as a country, we want to grow as a province, we want to have the best. Well, then we have to educate them, right? So thanks to the archives, I was able to kind of get into the document myself a little bit this morning, but we've found it again now, so it's back up online. So thanks to the archives, the report exists, and it will exist in perpetuity, even if the government was to decide to destroy links, which is good to know. And what it said is because nearly every education issue we're discussing right now was already documented in this in detail, so many pages, 22 years ago. So how did they do this? Well, the ACOL, I was a part of this as a parent, and I was a part of this as a teacher. So they actually had all of these meetings, and they talked to everybody. Now, this was done under a conservative government. And I want to point out that our curriculum, which now is awful, but when they first decided they were going to change up the curriculum, that was also under a conservative government. Because conservatives, traditional conservatives, value education. They value it highly. They value fiscal responsibility and transparency. Conservative values are a well-educated population. That is important to them. And so the government did start this, and they had all of these meetings and all of these things. And then with the curriculum, the NDP came in and they continued those meetings, and we finalized it, and we were ready to release it after it's been seen by all the stakeholders. And then the UCP came in and they tossed it, and they started from scratch, and they hired from Virginia, and that's a whole nother video. Here we see again, one government starts something that actually is really great. I like that I'm able to say something nice about conservative governments today. Because, as I've said, we are being far too narrow-minded if we're just focusing on the UCP in this situation. It's far bigger than that. So they had all these meetings, and they produced this document that we can all go and read online, which is great. The core findings of it were basically that we need to reduce class sizes. This does matter. Back in 2002, we knew this. 2003, pardon me, when the document came out. We knew it in 2002. We went on strike, too. We needed to increase support staff. And this was pre-full inclusion when this study came out, right? We need to provide stable, predictable funding. And that is something that we have failed at significantly over the years, right? So it's not that complicated or controversial. It's just necessary stuff, right? So the class size recommendations are such. Under this document, if you're in kindergarten through grade 3, you should have classes of 17 students. That would be a dream. Grades 4 to 6, 23 kids. Grades 7 to 9, they think we should have around 25. And in high school, grade 10 to 12, we should have 27. And the priority has always been on the earlier grades, because the idea being we put in the resources when they're younger, especially in the first 5-6 years of life when brain development is so expansive, right? It's really worth it to dig in and put the supports in place then, because we have to do less later. It's always harder the later we start with any type of intervention, right? You want to get things, nip them in the bud, right? You want to get these kids set up for success early on. And so in my teaching career, I can speak to the fact that when they've been talking about sacrifices around class sizes, as a high school teacher, I would often hear, I'm sorry that you have 44 kids in your class, but we really need to have more teachers at the elementary level, so we're shifting people around because we really want to keep that class number down. I taught in one division where we really tried to keep classes around 21 for grades 4 to 6. I remember that being a magic number, 21. And you wouldn't think that 6 or 7 extra bodies in a room would change everything, but it does. In fact, one body in a room can change anything. You've asked teachers. Sometimes there's a kid who's needs a little bit more support and things, and, or they're just like, a little bit of a spicy human, right? And if the spicy human isn't there, your day goes a whole lot differently, right? One person makes a big difference in the room, let alone 7. And of that 7, probably 2 or 3 of them need some extra supports, right? In the world I live in anyways. So we've known that class sizes are important for a long time. This is 22 years ago this report came out, right? The problem is, though, that the funding didn't keep pace with rising enrollment. School boards didn't use the money to fill gaps. And I keep hearing about people, the corruption in the school boards. Back in this era, so I want to say around 2005 to 2008, in there, I can speak to some personal examples I've experienced where school boards maybe weren't using money the way they were supposed to, without naming names. But my daughter's special education things were impacted because money that was supposed to be providing supports to PUF was being spent on technology in the division. We reviewed that. We sent it all the way to the Minister of Education, and it was a big kind of, not scandal, but should have been. But we can speak to the fact that there was a time, and we're not talking now, though, because the funding structures have changed so dramatically, this isn't the case, but that they were in a position where they were able to put money into other things other than where they were necessarily earmarked. And this brings, I know I jump around a lot in my videos, but this sort of brings up the whole, they're talking about hiring 3,000 teachers, but then the wording is such that the money doesn't necessarily have to be used for teachers. It could be used for extra assessments for students. I don't think it's smart to give the boards any sort of, and not because I have anything against boards. In fact, the board I work with right now has been absolutely fantastic through this situation for us for support. It's really more that if the money is meant to go somewhere, it needs to be directed there in a way that it's going to go there. Why do you leave loopholes, right? Why do you leave opportunities for mismanagement? So when you see wording, they're like, we're giving you this, but it could also be used for this. You need to be paying attention because it might be used for this. So moving forward, that's something as a teacher I'm going to be keeping my eyes on pretty closely, right? And then we've also seen a significant class size increase since this time period. We've seen a demographic shift since this time period. I mean, I feel like I'm talking about a whole nother era, 2 decades ago. I know I'm getting old, my goodness. So as we move forward in time, in 2004, the PC government created a class size initiative. This is what I was talking about. Let's report class sizes. Let's show the difference. Let's see what's happening. And the funding was not keeping pace with the enrollment. They did find that out. So that might be one of the reasons they got rid of keeping track of class size, because it's hard to say funding isn't keeping pace if you don't know what it's keeping pace with. I don't know. I'm just a music teacher. So this happened and continued. It started with Klein and it continued through Stelmach and Redford. However, as we said, the class sizes were increasing. And in 2019, under the UCP government, under Jason Kenney, the class size initiative was ended. And the reporting was stopped. And the public reporting website was taken down. Hence my momentary panic when I saw that this document we're talking about was gone this morning. I'm like, my God, we have to be able to read for ourselves. I said it before, the UCP doesn't think that Albertans are smart and want to read and do research. We're very smart people. My goodness, they underestimate us all the time. So, the impact from this is, well, we see it today. Our class sizes are certainly larger now than they were in 2003. We have higher needs with fewer supports, and this has direct effects on literacy and behavior. Now, why do I bring up literacy? Well, we can talk about Bill 4 in a minute. But some of the other things that we don't always think about, we think about reading, writing, arithmetic when we think about school, but we don't necessarily think about self-regulation. We don't think about inclusion successes and failures. We don't think about the teacher workload and creep, and classroom safety, legitimately safety in classrooms. That shouldn't even be a conversation we're having. And I'm not even talking about the whole school shooting thing that's all evolved over this time period as well, and the lockdown drills and those sorts of things that make children feel unsafe. But some of the behaviors our children exhibit put staff and students and themselves at risk. And we are in a world where we don't have the supports to deal with that other than to basically clear a classroom. So if you have a child who goes off and they're volatile, that's our strategy. We get all the other children out into the hall, right? We have very limited on how we can physically intervene. I personally have what's called restraint training, and I don't have that as an educator. Let me say that up front. It's CPI. I have it as a parent because I have a child with severe autism. I hate the word severe. That's ableist language, but it comes from the idea that the labeling comes from the people looking at us with the diagnoses, and so how much work are we for you to help us fit in? So I'd be considered high functioning because I don't require a whole lot of work from neurotypical people, whereas my daughter, in fact, does require a fair amount of support to be able to fit into society and be successful that way, which is fine. But there's aggression that comes with this disorder at times. When words fail, we tend to react physically, right? And so when she started to get a little bit bigger, I decided I'd better learn how to protect myself and keep her safe in the process. And so I took my restraint training. So heaven forbid I have to hold somebody, I can do it. Even someone bigger than me, it's kind of cool. CPI, actually the best part about the CPI training was the de-escalation training. And just how to be aware of your surroundings, how not to put yourself in a situation where you're going to set people off in the first place, right? But we, as teachers, aren't allowed to use the physical part of that training. I use the de-escalation stuff on a daily basis, I'm telling you. Even in real life, it's just good to know how to communicate with people in a way that calms them down rather than making them more upset. I think that's smart, right? But these sorts of things are out of control in our divisions these days, and we don't have the strategies available to us to use, and we don't have the supports, and so you'll see videos of classrooms that have been destroyed. I've seen a couple online lately. And then the Minister of Education is like, oh, I didn't know that was happening. And I'm like, he also didn't know what PUF funding was. But, why would you need to know something like that if you're the Minister of Education? I digress. So, We definitely saw a direct effect on classroom safety since then as well. Bill 4. So this is current day Bill 4. So they're like, we are going to focus on literacy and numeracy. And we are all like, isn't that what we've been doing? Because not even talking about the ACOL, literacy and numeracy has been something we've been targeting heavily in most divisions. We have whole teams that come around and train teachers on the newest techniques and things. And the government has been putting in assessments, not screening so much, but assessments. Now, the difference is an assessment is more detailed, and it tells us information about an individual, whereas screenings are a little more universal. And they just kind of pick out this, there might be a flag, right? Is there a red flag here, or is it not a red flag, right? Whereas an assessment tells us exactly what the red flag is or isn't, green flag is or isn't, right? So we do a lot of assessing, especially at the grade 1, 2, and 3 level. And there are 2 assessments that they have been doing, and I was heavily involved in this year in the school I teach in, one on math and one on reading. And it's really fascinating as a teacher to sit down one-on-one with the kids and watch them do these assessments. I learned so much, just even by how they pick up the pencil and approach the situation. I learn a lot about how kids learn watching them. But teachers don't have time to do these assessments and have all that cool data and moments with those kids. So it's part of my assignment this year was to help and do those assessments. So then I would report back my findings to the teachers. But a lot of the anecdotal stuff that they would get to observe if they had the time to actually do it themselves, it sometimes gets lost in translation because I have to teach my other class, or, we're meeting quickly at the end of the day. There's a lot going on. So these tests take a lot of time. We spent all of September. We barely got through all of our grade 1s and 2s and 3s in September with the 2 assessments that currently exist. And it's not like they're doing it all day, every day those months, but we're constantly pulling kids, or we are stopping instructional time to spend an hour or 2 hours on an assessment at the ages of 6, 7, and 8, right? And these tests aren't even very well designed. So you would think, even if you're not an educator, as an educator, you're going to be like, no, terrible questions, bad assessment. But just think about it. If you wanted to practice how to do something, it would make sense if it was similar to how it actually happened. So if you were like, I'm trying to think of a sports example or a car. I don't know. If you're driving, and you've done a Mario Kart, right? It might be one thing, but there's better driving simulators out there that you can drive, and they actually practice driving, or flying a plane, right? Don't they have flight simulators that are just like the planes, which certainly is a little bit different than the computer game version of flight simulators, right? Somebody who's been in one of the real flight simulators, if they were actually going to fly a plane, probably could fly the plane once it was in the air. I don't know about landing it. But if you were on one of the video games and then you were expected to execute a flight, I think you would probably have more challenges. So it's kind of like that. The question I'm thinking of was on the grade 2 screening, and it was asking kids to plot on a number line. So it says 0, and then it has a higher number over here. In the examples, it's 10. And they'll say, plot 6 on this line. Okay, so you would teach the kids, okay, what's half of 10? About here is 5. Is 6 bigger than that? Yeah. And then they put their little X. Okay, and then you do another example. And then you turn the page and you say, and go on your own and do this. The first question is plot like 49. I'm making up those numbers, but it's between 0 and 100. So the kids have just spent a few minutes thinking about the difference between 0 and 10. And now the first question that they're actually being assessed on, where data is collected, is 0 out of 100. And then about 4 questions down, it's 0 out of 1,000. And if you know anything about 6 and 7-year-olds, their number concepts don't tend to go up specifically to 1,000, not in a detailed way, right? Like, I think the number 400 probably means the same as 4,000 or 4 million to their minds at that point, right? They don't have that concrete ability to take the abstract information. So, and that is what the screening or test assessment is about, right? Do they know how to do this? Well, no, they don't. But it's unfair when the practice question doesn't even line up with the objective. So, right off the bat, we're doing sub-assessments, a lot of assessments. I like the data we get from them. It is useful. We don't need more. And the government, under Bill 4, they're like, we're going to really focus on literacy and numeracy. And I'm like, we literally have 3 staff in our building, and that's all they do. We don't need another screening. And I like this phrase here. Testing tells us how students are doing. Support determines whether they succeed. The government doesn't figure this out. I'd like to put it on a bumper sticker. Testing tells us how students are doing. Support determines whether students succeed. For the politicians in the back, until they figure that out, they're just going to keep throwing stuff at us. And that is what Bill 4 is all about. So it is problematic in so many ways. I'm using notes and not a teleprompter tonight because I'm tired. That's been the theme of all my videos since we went back to work. I'm just lazy. I'm tired. All right. So if we were to have, in a hypothetical world, let's pretend that the recommendations from the ACOL back in 2003 had been implemented by any government, by the UCP, by the PC, by, I don't know, name a party, the Rhino Party. If they had gone in and done this, because this isn't just about the UCP, I have to keep saying that. This is so much bigger than one political party. This is about a broken system. And systems are not changed in 4-year election cycles. They're probably not changed in 2. They're probably not changed in 3. We're probably looking at generational change here. But we got to start, right? You know, we've got to start. So if we had kept with this, right now we would have grade 1 classes of about 17 kids, not 30. What would the staffing look like for that? Probably double of what we have now. We would have a full-time EA in every high needs room, it says. Now, this is interesting because this is in every high needs room. Back when this recommendation was made, it was before full inclusion. And I encourage you to go check out my video on how inclusion has not worked very well in Alberta, but how it could have. It's always how it could have. But there's also been some really great things along the way that I just wish they'd kept, right? But they always, every time there's a new election cycle, we throw out the old ideas and start fresh. And this is not conducive to changing systems. So it says a full-time EA in every high needs room. Well, if you've looked at the classroom complexity calculators our teachers have been putting outline, every classroom is, in fact, a high needs room now. I don't know a single room that isn't a high needs room. It's just, by the definition of what a high needs room looks like in the 2003 documentation, that is now not a high needs room. That is now a regular classroom. So let that sink in. That is how much things have changed. We would have earlier intervention. I know that, what's his pickle, Minister of Education boy there, you don't know what PUF funding is. I know that my MLA, Angela Pitt, doesn't know what PUF funding is. What a privilege to never have had to work with children who struggle to the point that they need supports and have to watch them not have it. It's what they've done to the program unit funding is, okay, we'll go down the soft eugenics road another day. I've got more thoughts on that. But a government that doesn't value its vulnerable, a government that isn't willing to engage with supporting the vulnerable and the young, especially when you put the supports in when they're young, we don't have to later. But that won't happen in the election cycle. And this is any government, not just UCP I'm complaining about with this one. We would see dysregulation supported before it escalates. So with this whole aggressions issue that we're having in schools and everywhere in the world probably, you want to stop aggression? Well, you have to find out why, because behavior is communication. And I've talked at length about this as well. Maslow before Bloom. And I legitimately think, and I've said it recently this week in a video, if the Minister of Education does not know what that sentence means, they should not be in the position to make decisions about education. So just briefly to refresh, Maslow was a human who had a theory, and his theory is very well founded, that if you have your basic needs met, then cognition can happen, right? So until we are well fed, till we're well rested, till we feel safe, a sense of belonging, all of those things, until we're there, we can't really learn, at least not at a high rate of success. And Bloom is the guy who came up with the how we learn. So from basic like recall memorization to actual synthesis to, right, the higher level thinking, abstract reasoning, right? But you can't have any of that without Maslow, right? And it does overlap a little because you can like get a kid to memorize their multiplication facts, but you can't get them to apply it anywhere if they don't have this, right? Like they're interdependent. And everything about Maslow goes against the way a lot of our schools are run. Like we need breakfast programs, we need far more counselors, we need far more educational psychological assessments so we know why the children need supports, not these universal screenings, right? So we wouldn't be seeing the level of dysregulation and aggression if we had the other supports in place, right? And we would actually be able to spend our time as teachers teaching much more intentionally rather than triaging crisis, right? It's just a fact, right? We spend a lot of time putting out fires and trying to look for solutions, and we can't just step back and go, okay, I'm intentionally going to fix this and this and this. There's just some time and energy, right? And the whole fun part about that was it wasn't a fantasy, it was the plan. And nobody implemented it. And nobody funded it. Some of it was tried to be implemented, legit, but the funding wasn't there, so we couldn't continue. And I really want to point out, as I've said many times in this video, this isn't just about the UCP, right? Any government today can choose to fund this, right? There's lots of blame to go around, but there's not a lot of people stepping up with solutions. That frustrates me. Oh my goodness. So if you want some change, well, as I'm always telling you, call your MLAs. Every email, every letter counts as 25 voices because they assume that not everybody who has the same opinion is going to reach out, right? Remind them we already have this blueprint. If you're speaking directly to the Minister of Education, if you happen to be in his riding, ask him why he doesn't know about it. Ask him why he doesn't know these things. Ask him why he doesn't know what PUF funding is. Ask him if he knows about Maslow before Bloom. That'd be my first question if I sat down with the gentleman. Do you understand this? But I don't know. I think the poor man is struggling even with knowing what the boundaries of his constituency is, because he's sending out like pamphlets about all of his successes to people who don't even vote for him. That's a waste of money. That's not fiscally responsible. Not to mention some of the things he's claiming his government was responsible for, actually the NDP. Angela Pitt did that too. She took the screenshot down she took the post down within about an hour when we pointed it out. She claimed that UCP had built Northcott Prairie School. I teach there. I tell you, they did not. That was started under NDP funding. So please continue to reach out to MLAs. We need this funded. We need this implemented. We don't need more research, although somebody did point out, and I thought this was an interesting fact. It'd be interesting to see what was different. Like if they came out with some different recommendations, because the landscape has changed with the demographics with full inclusion. So this document doesn't necessarily address some of our more current changes, but it's a damn good place to start. And if you have a damn good place to start and you've had 22 years access to it and you haven't, that's irresponsible governing. Shame on all of you. So it's just got to, I don't know, I have to flip my page. That's what I've got to do. Oh, I was going to talk about recalls. Recalls are an interesting topic. I'm heavily involved in the Recall Angela. And I'm actually going to be the media coordinator, so maybe you'll actually see me on real media. I'll tell you why I got involved. And I'm learning so much from the people who've come to sign the petition. We've only been collecting signatures for a day. I got about 60 in an hour this morning, so we're off to, or between me and another woman. And so we're off to a really good start. We'll have final numbers every day, I hope soon. But the reason that I got involved was I take democracy very seriously. I mean, I've mentioned it before. I grew up in a very politically active family, both as involved in traditional politics and involved in advocacy. So I've had great role models. I was raised conservative politically, but liberal advocate, like not liberal Trudeau liberal, but like liberal-minded, open-minded, right? So I've had a kind of interesting childhood and upbringing with both sides of that. And I really have been raised that democracy is probably the greatest gift we have in Canada. It's the freedom of speech and to be able to join with who we want to and to be able to say what we need. That's amazing. It's powerful. It's important. We see all over the world places that don't have it. We see places all over the world that are getting closer to not having it. And that scares me. And so as I've watched what's happened south of the border, and I've watched the fragmentation within our own province and country, and I've watched how social media algorithms only give us our own voices, and how we actually have to actively seek out the opposing idea. It's one of the great, maybe I joke, my anniversary's tomorrow. Maybe I married my husband because we really don't agree politically on much. But that checks my bias, right? As it checks his. We can have a polite conversation. It may get a little heated, but that's because we're passionate people. But it's not personal. It's about politics and ideas. And The inability to have that civil discourse concerns me. And so when you see us moving away from democracy, so with Angela Pitt, for me, that would be you have many, 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 many of your constituents reaching out to you about the issues in education. I'd love to see the solid numbers. I'm probably going to have to do a FOIP thing to get that, but I think I would like that information, because it's enough of us that you standing up in the legislature and voting to take away our constitutional rights means you're not doing your job. There's enough of us here in your constituency telling you that we don't support this decision. And I'm not just talking about teachers. My husband, who works in the oil field, doesn't support the notwithstanding cause. The nurses, the doctors I talked to today, a trucker guy, he's like, I'm a trucker and they're not doing this. And then he went on about the 120 speed limits, and that's a whole nother thing. This government's good at throwing like so many balls in the air, you can't keep track of everything that's happening. And that may not just be our government doing that. That might just be government, right? There's a lot of balls in the air. But no, your constituents did not support you voting in favor of that, and yet you towed the party line. We have I think it's over 90,000. When I moved here, it was 74,000 5 years ago. 74,000 people 5 years ago, 90,000 now. We don't have a hospital. Everybody in Airdrie is concerned that we don't have a hospital. We were kind of excited when you expanded our urgent care, and then we found out that you didn't actually budget or send any money for resources to staff it. So you've given them more beds, but no more people, no more stuff. Dude, you're bad at your job. People are telling you they don't want this, and this is what you go and support. And when you want to sell it back to us, Miss Pitt, you don't even quote your own party's things. You're talking about things the NDP did. Like, look at us. We're so great. We built these schools, but actually the government before us that we don't like, NDP, they're the ones who did. I'm sorry. How can you retain your seat when you aren't representing the majority? And the argument that, well, she was elected duly, properly, absolutely. Right? Not by me, but by many. Obviously, there she is. But here's the thing. The UCP looked at that whole thing and went, you know what? There should be a checks and balances in place. There should be a way for the constituents to, recall an MLA. Now, I don't think they thought it would affect them. And I'm sorry that it did. I'm not sorry it did. I think it's funny that it did. I also think it's hilarious that we're not allowed to have like one petition question on the same topic at a time, and the Forever Canada guys beat you to it by like hours. I mean, you put things in place, but you don't look at the they're so close, like they're in a bubble. They're so out of touch. Angela Pitt, I can't, in good conscience, not take up your government's offer to do recall petitions. You put it out there. Now you can't be mad that we're doing it. Right? And when you do a petition, I won't hold up all my documents, but like the canvasser application, there's this thing we have to show you. So it's our statement of why we're doing it and what elections Alberta has signed off of, so we can do the petition. And then on the other side is supposed to be, or is the opportunity for basically a rebuttal statement. Right? So Angela Pitt was reached out to, and she was like told, like, dude, you can have a statement here. And she chose not to. So we instead have a letter from Elections Alberta saying, there should be a letter from Angela Pitt here, but there isn't. And if that is not the most, well, it's not even ironic. I mean, because she's famous for not answering emails or responding to people. That's why she's famous, right? So she may have been duly elected, but then her government put in some checks and balances, and we as citizens are choosing to exercise them. And if you don't agree with the recalls, that's fine. Don't come and sign the petition, right? Vote how you vote. I'm going to vote how I vote. We're not here to cause controversy. We're simply here to exercise the rights that have been given to us, because we still live in a democracy. At least we did last time I checked. It still says so in the textbook, right? So this was the slide I was talking about at the beginning. So as of 9 a.m., it wasn't on the website, okay? It is now. And the archive link is in the description. So for all perpetuity, if you want to find the ACOL, you can go and read it yourself. And I recommend it. It's heavy reading. There's a lot of stuff in there. But Basically what it says is you need smaller class sizes, you need to support the kids who have additional needs, and you need to put a solid, consistent funding structure in place. And I didn't delve into the funding structure stuff too much. I did do another video on that, so I'll let you, maybe I'll link that in the comments later. But honestly, just go to my playlist. I don't have that many videos. I haven't been doing this very long. Right, you'll be able to find it. But the reality is, it used to be that the funding was per student, and then there was funding per special needs code, which there isn't anymore. Basically, as of September 30th, how many butts you have in chairs, that's the funding you get for the following year. So if you have 992 butts in chairs on September 30th, you get funding for 992 children next year. It doesn't matter if you have 700 children or you have 1,200 children. You get that funding. It's not stable. Like, just in a nutshell, there's that for you to chew on this beautiful Friday evening. So, thankfully, it's back up. And I would like to thank you for watching. I really think it's important that the facts are put out there. I do my very best to research that, and I mean, my bias is clear in everything I speak. I mean, clearly I am who I am, and I believe what I believe, but I equally respect that other people have the rights to believe what they believe. I was recently, I was on the news because I was the one who videoed a counter-protester, we'll call him. I just think he was a really angry man. Anyways, who came and yelled at us at a protest before we were ordered back. And, one of the things the reporter had asked me, it was like, shouldn't those sorts of things be prevented? What sort of things should be put in place? And I was like, I really don't think there should be things put in place to prevent protesting on either side of the issue. I mean, the man could have stood across the street from us, and my only issue was the language, right? We had children present. You don't talk like that in front of children. It's rude. It's inappropriate. And then the aggressive behavior, right? He was physically in the faces of some of our protesters. I actually felt one of the kids was unsafe, and so in the video you can hear me moving the child. But you have the right to say what you want. You just aren't free from the consequences of your actions. When I teach about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Social Studies, and I learned this from another teacher years ago, he used to say, "My rights extend as far as my fist reaches your nose." Meaning, I can do whatever I want until it harms you. Once it harms you, my rights end. Because with rights come responsibilities. Nothing is free in life, I'm sorry. You can feel however you want, but you are not, free from the consequences of your choices, good or bad, right? Your feelings are valid, but your response may not be. And that was the case with this poor man. I really think the poor guy has some other things going on, some anger issues for sure, and I really hope he gets some help, and that he finds a positive way to express his opinions. I actually went and looked into the whole Texas thing he was ranting about. It's not relevant where we are, but interesting. AI as coaches, interesting. I mean, I am heavily reliant on AI in a lot of ways as a dyslexic individual, and yeah, no, just some of the ideas and things it helps me put together. I still have to vet it. I still have to double check all my research because it isn't infallible, but interesting idea. But I firmly believe that he has as much a right to say what he believes, and the people who don't think the recalls should be happening have as much to say that out loud as they want. But there is absolutely no excuse for attacking each other over it. It doesn't solve anything. It just causes hostility. If I don't think that this should be happening, then I don't need to engage. Now, the fact that, and I guess maybe this is it, because if there's no opportunity to engage directly, then it feels like you're not defending, right? So I do feel that vibe in some of the comments. I'm trying to stay out of the comment section because it's hard, right? I'm not here to cause controversy. I'm here to exercise my rights, and I'm hoping that you will do the same with yours. But yeah, ADHD train left the station. I don't know where it went. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought on that one. I'll try and come back to it later, or not, because I'm trying to wrap this up. But I really feel that we don't have to have a negative discourse. We can have a civil discourse. I don't feel that anybody needs to show up while I'm asking for or offering an opportunity, really is all we're doing, to come and sign a petition and be with like-minded people. It's just like, as somebody who maybe isn't a UCP supporter at all, when going to the Alberta Next, I was welcomed there, sort of. not by the moderator, but by the people who attended. Because legitimately, Albertans are good people, and I really think in my heart that Conservatives are good people who value, as I've said, education, fiscal transparency, all of these things that the current government, although they have the C in their name for Conservative, don't demonstrate. And actually, that'll be a video coming up shortly. I've been doing my research on that today, just kind of looking at what is the definition of a Conservative historically within Canada versus the decisions they make. And some things UCP does absolutely line up with the Conservative agenda. Agenda is not the right word because that's kind of, but you know what I mean, but the whole philosophy. But a lot of it doesn't. And so I was kind of joking around with someone. I was like, it's the unconservative party. A lot of truly good conservative people voted for what hasn't turned out to be an actually conservative-minded government. I'm seeing that when I'm talking to people at the petitions. That is one of the reasons people are telling me when I ask, why are you signing? It's not just because Angela Pitt doesn't return emails. Not just, although that is my most frequently heard response so far in this whole journey. So please, please, please ask questions, demand answers, hold your elected representatives accountable. You elected them. Your voice is as important as the person next to you. And I think that living in a country where we're able to demonstrate that freely is a really wonderful thing. And I'm hoping that although I do say a lot of negative UCP stuff because they make me very angry, people understand that's me saying stuff because they make me angry. It's not because I think they have to make you angry. You're entitled to feel how you feel. And just like I am not free from the consequences of my actions and my responses, neither are you. So moving forward, I am grateful that the ACOL is still online. I am sad that nobody, including the NDP, ever really looked at it and implemented it in a way that it could be successful. I think that it needs to be revisited and updated, but I don't think we need to start from scratch. And I think that our elected officials need to demonstrate proficiency, or at least a basic knowledge of the fields that they represent before they're handed the portfolio. It blows my mind what the Minister of Education says sometimes. And because I'm like, nobody who's walked into our classrooms would even think, what? Oh my God. Anyways, I'm going to sign off for the night, and thank you all for watching. If what I have to say resonates with you in any way, please like, subscribe, share. My whole point of doing these is I really honestly believe that every voice matters, and so what I have to say matters as much as anybody else's. And you can choose to subscribe to my ideas or not, or argue with them or not. But I really think that as somebody who has experience in so many genres of education, I've taught in urban, I've taught in rural, I've taught every subject from K to 9 and then others all the way to 12. I feel like I come as an educator with a really nicely rounded perspective, and I feel that I should share that. And so not everyone agrees. I'm sure the meeting I was in earlier today where my microphone wouldn't be unmuted and they thought that was hilarious because I'm a yipper yapper. I was painfully silenced, but I'm not here. So I'm sorry, or you're welcome. Take it or leave it. And like, subscribe, share, and please do the same with your own voice. It's really important. And our government is supposed to be of the people, for the people. That might be not an Albertan slang thing. Maybe I'm stealing that, but democracy is supposed to be our government. The legislature is supposed to be our house. And if you personally feel that that is not the case, then I encourage you to step up, get involved, and keep fighting the good fight. So, as I jokingly say, viva la revolution, and I shall continuing, and then the horrors persist, and so do I. Enjoy your evening.